Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am here to talk about a trade paperback of a 6-issue miniseries from Marvel Comics dating back to 2004. I am going to be talking about X-Force Cable, The Legend Returns. This book is written by Fabian Nicieza and drawn by Rob Liefeld. By the time this video goes up, I will have had this book for almost a week. If you saw my haul video I put up earlier this week, you will remember that I went into this book thinking it wouldn't be that good, but that it might at least be enjoyable. And you know what? I tried. I wanted to enjoy reading this. I wanted to feel like I was 13 years old again and that I loved reading Rob Liefeld comics. But guys, this comic is so bad. Like one of the worst comics I've read this year kind of bad. It's not as bad as Howard Chaykin's Challengers of the Unknown mini, which came out the same year as this mini, but it is a very close second. And let me just go ahead and say, I don't enjoy being negative and saying this movie was terrible, this book was awful, but I like to try and put out videos almost every day, and if I'm going to meet that goal, then that means sometimes I have to review whatever it is that I have watched or read recently. And that means, as was the case this time, that I will have to review something that is horrible. Now, before I get into the plot of this monstrosity, allow me to tell you about my theory on how this book was constructed. I am assuming that Marvel Editorial wanted Liefeld and Nicieza to do a story on the X-Force characters that they worked on in the early 1990s. So they asked those guys to do a story. Or those guys came to Marvel Editorial and asked to do the story. Either way, an agreement was reached, but that's not the important part of my theory. This story reads as if Rob Liefeld drew 6 issues of nonsense, and then Fabian Nicieza had to look at these pages and figure out how to make it feel like it was a cohesive story that makes sense from beginning to end. And I guess he tried. I don't know much about Nicieza, but I do recall reading some comics from him that weren't awful. I don't think of him as a bad writer, but if this was the only book that someone had read from him, I'm sure they would think he was awful. Because even if Nicieza is the greatest writer in the world, which I am not saying that he is, but even if he was, there's only so much that one can do with pages that read like a group of children plotted them while playing with their toys. And you may be thinking, wow, that's harsh, man. No need to go for such a low blow. But maybe if you'll listen to the plot of this book, you might think that I'm not being so harsh. The story opens with, I don't even know. I have 2 possibilities on where this story opens. We see a guy who I believe is a young Cable. He has the cybernetic arm, but his hair is darker and longer, so I guess it's him when he was younger. But he's riding a horse, and I'm getting the feeling that this is actually like a fantasy land, the likes of which you might see in a Conan the Barbarian story. So I'm thinking, okay, this is a dream, and the characters and places we are seeing in this dream are representative of something that has already happened in a more realistic way, or might happen in the future. But then we find out that this really is a dream, but it actually did happen. So then I'm thinking, okay, no, this wasn't in the far past, this was actually 1,000 years in the future, and Cable might have been in his late 30s in this flashback/flash forward thing. And that was the presumption I went with until a couple of issues into the story, the monster that we see young Cable slay in the opening of this story, it is reawakened in the present day. And the priests who were dead in the flashback/flash forward thing, they still had flesh then, but in the present day, when the monster is reawakened, we see those priests, but they are just skeletons. So what in the round world is actually going on here? Are we meant to take away from this that Cable somehow traveled into the far past before he came to the less far past to mentor the New Mutants? If so, could we have a quick caption explaining this? I've spent way more time and energy thinking about how this is supposed to work, and it isn't even the kind of fan theorizing like you do when you watch or read something that you love, and you think, oh, what if we were wrong and this is what's happening? It's the kind of agonizing thinking that I do when I read something that does not make sense. So anyway, in this time period where Cable is younger, he slaughters a monster that is called a Skorn, S-K-O-R-N. This is a giant bipedal squid monster that eats mutants, and over the course of this story, different characters say that this thing is worse than Magneto, Apocalypse, and the Phoenix Force. Yes, an entity that literally destroyed a solar system is somehow less of a threat than a giant squid that eats mutants. Then, in the present day, these guys from the future attack Cable and Domino. These guys are genetically enhanced humans, and they don't like mutants, and they are going to somehow use the Scorn to kill mutants. So then Cable and Domino go find Shatterstar, who is hanging out in a temple with ninja monks. Cable's words, not mine. The genetically enhanced human guys follow Cable to the temple, attack these guys, and then kill them all. But our three, what do I call them, heroes I guess? They killed all of the time-traveling human mutant things, and anyway, at this temple was a special knife called the Five Fingers of Destruction. It only has 3 blades on it, so let that sink in. Oh, and then the daughter of the main monk, she comes by and somehow thinks that Shatterstar has killed her dad, so she is going to hunt him down. But don't worry, that doesn't ever come back in any way in this story. Then, in between pages, Cable has recruited Sunspot, Warpath, and Boom Boom to help him. Meanwhile, this other guy from Cable's future, John Spector, he has contacted Cannonball, who is apparently super important in Cable's future. But don't worry, that never comes back in any way in this story. This guy from the future somehow convinces Sam that Cable is a lying jerk, and then Sunspot and Sam both decide that they don't like Cable. So then Cable and his group go to this underground facility where humans are experimenting on mutants. They're here to rescue Caliban so that he can help them fight the Scorn. Not because he's being experimented on against his will, but so that he can help them. But Wolverine is here, also trying to rescue Caliban. Then Deadpool somehow gets teleported in, and then the leader of these humans experimenting on Caliban, he suggests that maybe they should all work together to defeat the Scorn, but Cable's group doesn't like this idea at all. Then from out of nowhere, the human gets killed. Who else killed this guy but Strife, Cable's clone, along with the members of the Mutant Liberation Front and Sunspot and Cannonball, who are also with these guys. But Strife is dead, you and Cable both say. This is actually a future version of Domino from a reality where Cable failed to defeat the Scorn. Now this means that we are dealing with 2 different futures in this already complicated story. But don't worry, outside of this absolutely weird moment where we see that old Domino is pretending to be Strife, this doesn't come back in any way in this story. So then all of these guys, Cable, the 2 Dominos, the members of the Mutant Liberation Front, Wolverine, Deadpool, and Cable's X-Force team, they all go to fight the Scorn monster that has been awakened and is battling 2 members of the Fantastic Four. Oh, and while all of this is going on, some members of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard somehow find out that the Scorn is awakened once again, which makes me believe that Cable somehow traveled to the far past at some point when he was younger and fought the Scorn then. Not sure how or why that can fit into his already pretty convoluted past, but I guess it does. But if you're curious how the Shi'ar Imperial Guard factor into this story, they do not, at all. They don't come back in any way that matters in this story. Then after an entire issue of these guys pointlessly blasting this monster with their powers, Cable decides that maybe it's time to pull out this magic knife that he already knew would kill the monster. Then we find out that to kill the Scorn, someone else has to die. So Cable disappears while stabbing the Scorn, and then everyone else is all sad, and then the end of the story. Ordinarily, I would not have spent so much time on the plot, but I feel like if I had spent any less time talking about it, you might have been wondering, why was this done in 6 issues? Well, the reason is because this is really a plot that could have been done in 2 or 3 issues, but this thing is fluffed out with pointless fights that take up lots and lots of space, as well as the group just going from point A to point B to point C, trying to gather people to fight this monster. When, let me remind you, Cable already knew that the 5 Fingers of Destruction would kill this thing. In fact, Cable could have just gone from the temple where he got the knife and then used his telepathy or something to find the monster, and then he wouldn't have had to gather an entire team at all. But you might be saying, well, this is an X-Force book, so we have to have Cable gathering the team. And to that I say no. If the team is very useless and doesn't serve any purpose in this story at all, then it does not even need to be an X-Force story in the first place. This could have very easily just been a straight-up Cable story with guest appearances by Domino and Shatterstar. Maybe not even Shatterstar. As soon as we got to the double spread page where Sunspot, Warpath, and Boom Boom are standing with Cable's group, I instantly knew that these guys would be incidental to the story, since Liefeld and Nycesia spent no time at all introducing us to them. I think at the end of the day, I really only have two big problems with this as a story. That means if you want to hear someone complain for 15 minutes about Liefeld's art, you're going to have to go somewhere else, because I'm only going to be talking about the story itself for a few minutes. I'm seeing two big problems here. One, this thing really follows no structure like you would see in a real story. Cable and Domino find out about this monster, then they spend the first 5 issues going from place to place, talking to people and fighting those same people. I didn't really feel like you needed issues 2, 3, 4, or 5. This is a 6-issue mini, and 2/3 of it is just filler. They find out that the monster is going to wake up, then in issue 6, they fight the monster. This story doesn't feel like it has consequences for the things that the characters do. I once heard someone say, and this is a very wise saying, when constructing a story, construct it in a way where each scene is relevant and necessary, and where each scene flows from the previous scene. And this story fails at that. After Cable and Domino go get the special magic knife, every other scene is just, we need some help. And then people yell at Cable, and then they either decide to go with him or they don't. If you can erase 2/3 of the story and it still makes just as much sense, then you have an extraordinary problem with your story. My second big problem with this story is one that I feel like I am enunciating often on this channel. I don't feel like there is any character to this book. Oh, there are plenty of characters, plural. Something like 15 characters that I could name are in this story. But that itself is part of the problem here. When you have characters who are only in the book for a few pages, they aren't in the book long enough to even matter or be developed or go through any kind of meaningful change in who they are as a person. Which, that's important for me. I feel like if a story does not have that moment where characters change and grow based on what they've experienced in the plot, then the story isn't worth the time I spent experiencing it. But that one character who is only there for a few pages is taking up space that could be taken up by characters who potentially could be important. Someone like Cable or Shatterstar, who are both very present in this story, at least compared to characters like Caliban and Deadpool, they miss their chance to experience any change over the course of this story because so many other characters are crowding them out of the book. And before you say that Cable does get a character arc, since he sacrifices himself to kill the monster, I'm calling foul on that because it just comes out of nowhere. There's no build-up, and Cable has in fact endangered the life of everyone at this battle by not doing this sooner in the story. So that's really all I've got here, guys. This is not a story that I feel like anyone should read. It is not a good story. It's not even a bad story that is at least fun. It's just awful, and at times I felt myself whimpering and asking myself aloud, why am I reading this? This is a state of mind I don't find myself in very often, guys. Do yourselves a favor and don't put yourself in that same place that I was. Stay clear and far away from this book. So I hope my astounding negativity has not put you in a foul mood. This is twice this week that I have had bad things to say, guys. I don't set out to do this. It just happens so that I can put out videos for you guys. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video, or maybe not enjoyed. I hope you at least found the video helpful, and if you did, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back tomorrow with, hopefully, a more upbeat and positive video. Until then, I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.